Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's talk about Grand Prairie, Texas. Let's buy a house there. How about that? Grand Prairie, Texas. How to buy. If you're thinking about buying in Grand Prairie, this is the live stream for you. So, as you are coming in, a like is going to go a long way. And am I centered? I might not be centered. Let's get right into it. So, let's talk about how to actually buy a home in Grand Prairie, Texas. Now, we're going to go pretty quick, but you have another resource that I'll be able to share with you throughout our journey, but I'll go ahead and say it now. It's the DFWHomebuyerClass.com. So if you go to DFWHomebuyerClass.com, you're going to see all of the information that we're covering today, but in more additional detail. So we're going to go fast. We're going to make this happen. So let's talk about how to buy a house in Grand Prairie, Texas. First off, here's the roadmap that we're going under. We're going to go through our mindset check. We're going to make sure that we have the right mindset. And I know it sounds a little bit hokey, but here's what I mean here. But hang in there with me. That actually makes sense. So it's not going to be one of those things that you probably are thinking when you hear, oh, have that mindset. We're going to talk about the financial assessment. We're going to talk about getting pre-qualified, finding that right real estate agent, how to home search, how to do your home search effectively, how to go under contract, and then break down when you're under contract, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and then going into closing and what to do after you close. So as an example, I'll give you a sneak peek. So after we close with our client, we give them a complete breakdown on what they should be doing their first week after they close, what they should be doing 30 days after closing, and what they should be doing yearly, along with some tips as they become homeowners. So this in and of itself, you do want to have in your corner. Now, this is something that you're also going to see on DFWHomebuyerClass.com. So I encourage you to check that out. But let's begin. Really, one of the first things that we need to start talking about is the mindset. So what does this mean? This doesn't necessarily mean like, hey, have a positive mindset. That is not what we're talking about. Whenever I say having the right mindset, it's basically given perfect conditions. So given perfect conditions, do you plan to move forward? That's essentially it. Is that something that makes sense for you to move forward? That's think of it this way. The question that we ask our clients to ask themselves is, if it makes sense for me to buy, will I do it? I'll say it again. If it makes sense for me to buy, will I do it? So we're assuming a lot of things. We're assuming that it is the right thing to buy, or it's a good idea to buy. If that is the case, will I go through with it? Now, that's a question that you want to ask yourself, because if you continue going down the rabbit, if you continue going down that path of home ownership, you could quickly find yourself into a mortgage that you didn't even want to be in. You can quickly find yourself leading one thing to another, one thing leads to another, and then all of a sudden you own a brand new home. Well, what if you didn't want it? I know it sounds so silly. I know it sounds so bad, but it's the best way to avoid buyer's remorse. A buyer's remorse is a real thing, and oftentimes it's not because they should have chosen this house over another house. It's just more that whenever we run across buyer's remorse is because they actually it didn't make sense for them to buy, right? So whenever they get that first mortgage statement, well, that's really when reality hits. Now, if some questions to ask yourself is, what is your financial situation, which we're going to talk about here shortly, but also you need to understand, do you even, what are your life plans? What are you going to be staying in that area any longer? Are you, do you even want to be doing home ownership? So again, really having the mindset is super important, and asking yourself, if it makes sense for me to buy, will I actually do it? That's one of the most important questions that you can ask yourself. Now, you're still going to go through the exercise, and sometimes along the way, you might find that it might not be right. But at the very beginning, to avoid the whole buyer's remorse, it'd be good to ask yourself that question beforehand. Let's continue. So having that mindset right is super important, but also understanding the financial, giving yourself a financial assessment. So giving an understanding what the actual cost of home ownership are. So we'll break this down a little bit further to give you an idea. Here's what this means. Oh, this is going to throw everything off. Maybe we can't. So this is what this means. When we're talking about the financial assessment, we're really talking about 3 types of costs. We're talking about Home ownership costs. So the cost of owning a home. So again, we're in the financial assessment. This is a very big overview of the three things to consider financially when you're buying a home. Number one is the home ownership cost. We all know that there's a mortgage involved if you're not buying cash. So that's pretty self-explanatory. But there's some additional costs that are often overlooked. The additional utility cost. When you are living in a home, that's a little bit different than when you're living in an apartment. Maintenance. Again, when you're living in a home and own a home, that's a little bit different than if you are renting a home where the landlord's taking care of the repairs. So if the water heater goes out in your rental, well, that is the landlord's problem. That financially is still your problem because you need that. But it's not your problem at the end of the day. It's the landlord's. But if you own the home, well, it is your problem. So understanding those differences, again, from a financial standpoint, that's one important thing to understand, the home ownership cost. The second thing to understand whenever you're looking at making that decision of buying a home is a transaction cost. So the actual cost to purchase. You're looking at a down payment, and you're also going to be looking at closing costs. You're going to be looking at some additional expenses in order for you to close. So as an example, if you're going to be buying a home with the minimum down payment, well, you can buy a home with as little as 3% down. That is the down payment, that amount that you put into the home that will ultimately make you a homeowner, and you own 3% of that. However, there's still closing costs to factor in. So closing costs can vary 3 to 4%. So 3 to 4%, where does that go? That includes title policy. That includes lender fees. That includes appraisals. That includes prepaids. So as an example, prepaids is where you prepay a certain amount of months for home insurance, where you prepay a certain amount of months for property taxes. That's what we're talking about here. So the transaction cost is a very real thing. Now, the third cost when it comes to home ownership, that is the moving cost. It costs money to move. It costs money. Let's just say you're renting an apartment and you break your lease. Well, it's going to really cost you at that point because there are some penalties for that. But let's just say you time it so perfectly, like what we try to do with our clients, you time it so perfectly. Well, there's still you moving out of the apartment, and there's still probably a good chance that you're going to hire somebody to clean or yourself clean. Past the walls because you made a bunch of holes in it. You're trying to bring that apartment back to the state that it was in order for you to get the security deposit back. So there's that cost of you leaving the present residence that you're in, the present home. Well, there's also a cost for you to move into your new home, right? So we have that U-Haul, we have the professional movers, we have whatever we're renting to get our belongings from point A to point B. Well, there's that cost, but also there's a cost in point B whenever you bought that home, especially if it's a resale. So you might be wanting to do some updating on your home. So as an example, with this particular home that I bought, this is one of the first homes that I've bought that is a resale that's not a new build, because that was typically what I was buying here in the past several years. Well, I did, the moment that I got in here, I redid the bathroom, the second bathroom here. Well, that's an expense, right? So there's the upgrades and any repairs that you might be needing to do that you found in the inspection. So again, what we're talking about here is that financial assessment, really understanding, hey, does it make sense for me from a financial perspective? So we're hitting it with three different questions, or understand three different things, which is the home ownership cost. Are you prepared for that? The transaction cost. Are you prepared for the down payment and the closing cost? And then the cost to move, a very real cost as well. So all of this adds up. So for you to buy a home, it's not just you trying to cover the down payment. It's much more than that. Then once you go through that and we have some financial calculators that you can absolutely use. We have the affordability calculator in the DFWHomebuyerClass.com. It's a full hub that you get access to all of these tools, and we can cover those at a later time. But I just want to introduce you to it right now. The next step is going to be getting pre-qualified. So you made the decision. All right, so I'm going to explore this to where it's logical conclusion. If it makes sense for me to buy, I'm going to buy. If it doesn't make sense for me to buy, then I don't, right? So you made that decision. Then you're going and looking at the financial cost associated to that. So You understand that there's going to be additional costs for you to be a homeowner. You understand that there's going to be a down payment plus some additional closing costs. And you also understand that it's going to cost to move, and you are okay with that. Well, now we're going to need to get into pre-qualified to know how much of a loan we are going to be able to secure from a lender in order to purchase a home. In other words, how much home can we afford? This is that home affordability. There's many tools out there that will help you walk you through that. But again, if you go to homebuyer, DFWHomebuyerClass.com, that hub right there will give you access to all the tools that you're going to need. So to get pre-qualified, the importance of it, let's talk about that, and then we'll get into a little bit more brass tacks on how to get pre-qualified. When you're looking at getting pre-qualified, the importance of it cannot be overstated, given the fact that if you do not go through the pre-qualification process with the lender, essentially you do not consult with the lender, and you try to put an offer on a home that you saw on Zillow just by itself, well, no seller is going to take you seriously. That's the reality. So if you think of it, put yourself in a homeowner's shoes. If you receive an offer from John Smith, and it's essentially giving you what you're asking for, and you're thinking, hey, this is a really good deal, but hey, prove to me that you can actually purchase. I'm not going to go under contract with you until I have at least an understanding of how you're going to come up with this money. Right, so essentially you're asking for proof. You're asking for proof of funds if they're going to buy it cash, so you need to see the bank statements. Now, if they're not going to buy it cash and are going to get a loan, well, you need to have a piece of paper, again, a pre-qualification letter here, that at least gives you the peace of mind that, okay, well, a lender has already at least reviewed or had a conversation with the individual and has a good sense that this person might qualify for a loan. Right, it's not a full approval. It's a pre-qualification, where a pre-qualification is essentially a buyer submitting their information to a lender, typically through an app, letting them know the assets that the buyer has. So in this particular case, as you try to get a pre-qualification letter, you're going to reach out to a lender and share the assets that you have. You know, if you have stocks, if you have cash somewhere, if you have whatever assets you happen to have, if you own other real estate, you're sharing the assets that you own. You're also sharing your credit. So they're going to be pulling your credit, but with the credit, it'll give, you're sharing, and they'll pull the credit, and you're essentially sharing with the credit, your credit worthiness. Now, to get approved for a loan, most loans will require about a 580 or higher. So 580 is pretty much the floor of any loan out there that you're going to stumble across. So a 580 is the minimum. The higher the credit score, the better interest rates, the more favorable terms that you receive. So that's the second thing that you need to be mindful of when you're applying for a loan. The third thing to be mindful of is going to be your debt to income ratio. So that's something that your lender looks at very closely. So they need to know how much debt you owe versus how much you're making. So they essentially, it gives you that ratio, it gives them the ratio to have a better understanding of how much they can actually allow you to borrow. So that's where you often hear that debt to income. So DTI, debt to income ratio. So the lender will look at your assets, will look at your credit, and will also look at your debt to income ratio. Those are the three main components that the lender will look at. Now, that's going to bake in some additional things to be mindful of. They're going to look at employment. So if you just started working last month and this is the first time that you were ever working, well, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge, right? So typically a lender is going to ask for 2 years of work history in most cases. So again, just give you some building blocks when it comes to pre-approvals to one, share the importance of getting pre-approved, because if you don't have a pre-approval letter, then a homeowner is not going to really take you seriously. But B, you also want to understand what you're going to be asked for whenever you reach out to a lender to try to get pre-qualified, to understand how much you're going to be eligible for. Now, finding the right real estate agent. So here's a very, very alarming stat that you need to be aware of, and I don't want to scare anybody, but it is pretty important that you know it. Half of the real estate agents last year sold 1 or 0 homes last year. I'll say that again. Half of the real estate agents out there sold one or no homes last year. Now, that's not me throwing shade, but that's really sharing with you the importance of you working with a qualified real estate professional. So there's two main components that you should look for whenever you're looking for a real estate agent. So as a quick reminder, we're going through this right here. Working with the right real estate agent is super important. There's really two primary things to look at in regards to a real estate agent. You're looking at their real estate ability, so essentially their knowledge about real estate, their understanding of contracts, their understanding of the process, their understanding of addendums and amendments and how all of that works, the understanding of the rights that you as a buyer do have. So again, real estate knowledge is what I'm saying here. That is super important that your real estate agent have. The second thing that your real estate agent should have is understanding of the local market that you're trying to buy in. If an agent does not know anything about your market, that's not really a good sign. So they may know anything and everything about the real estate process, but if they don't know much about that market, then and especially if you're just moving in, that is also a problem, right? So when you're looking for that real estate agent, you're looking for both of those. That's something that is often overlooked. Sometimes we think that simply because somebody has a real estate license, they're capable of selling real estate. Unfortunately, that's not the case, especially with the lack of transactions that the average real estate agent ends up doing. So just be mindful of that. I'm not saying you should be you should only work with real estate agents that sell 1 billion homes per year. That's not what I'm saying here, but really at least have somebody with some experience that's going to really help you out, especially if this is your first time doing the home purchase, right? So just finding that right real estate agent is super important. But now let's look at something that is really the fun part, where most of us actually start at our home search, and that is actually looking at homes. So we mostly, whenever we're thinking about buying a home, we most of the time start looking in Zillow, start looking in realtor.com, start looking in Trulia, and start looking at homes, because that's what we know. We know homes, we know what they look like, and we want to see what is out there, and that is completely okay. But understand that that's not the first step that you would be looking for. That's somewhere along the middle. This is step 5 for us. So let's go and do some of that right now. Since we want to buy a house in Grand Prairie, we're going to go to Grand Prairie right now and understand what the market is doing, and give you ideas of different pockets. So we're going to spend a good amount of time here. So Grand Prairie, it has about 435 properties. This includes residential and commercial and land and condos and all that fun stuff. Available for sale right now at $403,000. Now what we're going to do is we're going to remove the condos, multifamily, commercial, land, townhouses, residential leases, and farm and ranch, and we're going to look at Grand Prairie. Now let's zoom out for a quick second. Grand Prairie is one of my favorites because it is still, in my opinion, undervalued in relation to where you are living. So as you can see here, the heartbeat, at least in my opinion, in the main DFW area between Fort Worth and Dallas is Arlington, again, in my opinion. But a main artery here, again, in my opinion, is Grand Prairie. So Grand Prairie has a ton of development being poured in here from a commercial space. So when you look at George Bush Turnpike, you're going to see epic waters, and you're going to see so much construction being done here. You have the Andretti go-kart, is it go-kart? The Andretti kart, Andretti Racing, I believe, is what there's go-karts. They're all pretty fun and cool. But it's all being built here. You have IKEA out here as well. You have all the newer restaurants. You have a lot of attractions. So again, a lot of investments being made into Grand Prairie. And what I like about Grand Prairie in and of itself, while much of it has been developed, most of the newer homes are going to be found down here south. And then here you're still going to see a few pockets of new construction, but for the most part, it has already been built out. What I like about Grand Prairie is how centrally located it is. So you can get up to the north part of the DFW Metroplex relatively easy through either 360 or 161, so essentially the George Bush Turnpike. Or if you need to get to east or west, either Dallas or Fort Worth, you also have very viable options there as well through I-30 and I-20. So as far as centrally located, It's very hard to beat Grand Prairie. And for that reason alone, I like it. But when we're looking at the real estate prices for what you can buy, I love it. So that's something that a lot of folks are that have maybe have mostly heard of Grand Prairie. I'm sorry, Arlington and Fort Worth, and might have been sleeping on Grand Prairie. So this is a city that if some of our clients that need to be working in Dallas maybe don't have the budget to be close to Dallas, then they'll either go out east, out to the Forneys of the world out here, or Mesquites of the world, or if they need to be a little bit closer into the DFW Metroplex, then we go out west, and we typically find home and refuge in Grand Prairie. That's where the migration pattern happens to be. But let's see what type of property is available right now. And let's start at our max price of $250,000 and see what if any homes are available for sale right now under $250,000. So we have a few, and I expected them to all be above I-20, and that is correct. So you're going to see some in the older part of the Metroplex. Now those are going to be more, well, we can scroll down here. Those are going to be more single garage homes that have either been converted to add that third or fourth bedroom. So for the most part, they're going to be 1,300 square feet homes that you have, but you still have homes for $250,000 or less. You're not going to be able to do that in other markets, at least they're centrally located. So just to give you an idea of what up to $250,000 can buy you, you can have some of these are going to be investor specials that are going to require some rehab, but there are some that you could still go into and live in pretty comfortably. All right, so we're going to do is then we're going to jump up to 250 up to let's keep it to 400,000. You're going to have a few more options there. So you have 100 homes between 250 to 400,000, and this opens up a majority of Grand Prairie for you. So again, this is a very affordable area to be in. This is not a location that you need a ton of money to go into, especially when you factor in the location of Grand Prairie. But just to give you an idea of the homes that are available, you see that they're scattered all throughout Grand Prairie. Now, as we get to higher price points, you're going to see a good amount of them actually start populating towards the south. But again, you have from 250 to 400,000, you have plenty of options scattered throughout the city. So if you need to be in the north part of Grand Prairie, or if you need to be in the south part of Grand Prairie, you have options here. And as you can see here, there's 2,000 plus square footage, and you're still under 400,000. And many of these do not require it to be touched at all. So you have a home that appears to be rehabbed based off of the photography that I'm seeing. And you see a home right here that it looks in really good condition. Again, up to 400,000. This looks like a newer build down here, which is most likely going to be in the south part of Grand Prairie. So you have options up to 400,000. You see most of them down here. All right, so let's look at another price point and see what we can get before we get into a luxury space. We're going to go to 400 up to 600,000. Apply filters. Now you're going to start seeing more of them show up down here, as mentioned earlier in the previous price point. Most of the more expensive properties you're not going to see in the central part of Grand Prairie. You're just not. So between 30 and 20, there's not going to be a ton of these homes in that price point. But as you get further into the DFW Metroplex and or into the southern part near the lake, then you are seeing the newer builds down here. This has been built in the last 10 to 15 years. This is when most of this was built, and now here this was built in the last 5 to 10 years. So I saw D.R. Horton build through here, I saw Bloomfield build through here, and then you get all down close to M3, which is right down here. That is presently being built right now. There are thousands of homes being built down here. Alrighty, so, and then just to cap it off, just to give you an idea of what the luxury space looks like, well, let me back up for a quick second. I'm going to show you the types of homes that you can buy up to 600,000. Really good looking homes. But let's go above 600,000, and just to give you an idea of what would be considered luxury in this town. So there's 38 homes available for sale above 600,000, and you see most of them are near the lake. So they're in the southern part of Grand Prairie, and you see the types of homes that are available, which there's a brand new build right there if you're interested. A huge house right here, 4,000 square feet. Huge house right there with 3-car garage. Incredible homes. Cool homes. Let's see what the most expensive home for sale right now in Grand Prairie is. $1.6 million. Oops. Okay. All right. Okay, now as you're searching for homes in the areas, some things are going to come up. One, the cost. So we're still here in the home search strategy. Before we go into actually reviewing a contract that I'll pull up here in a little bit, before I do that, I want to show you we're going to actually review a contract just to give you an idea of what the contracts look like. Before going under contract, one of the questions that's going to come up is, well, I get these homes and that's awesome. I want one of these homes, but well, what's going to be my monthly payment? That's often what gets asked of me whenever we're going out and searching for property. Of, hey, if I buy this $400,000 home, what's my payment going to be? So to give you an idea, I think it's better if we visualize it. Let's just see if we end up loving this property and we want to make an offer on it, and it's $400,000. You see the taxes here, you see the year, you see a ton of other information, but one of the things that's going to come up is the price. And while it depends if you're using Zillow, if you're using Trulia, if you're using any online portal, there's going to be a guesstimate of the monthly payment that you're going to make. And oftentimes that's making a lot of assumptions that we don't know where they're coming from. We don't know about the property tax rate. We don't know about the down payment. We don't know any of that. So what I want to show you here is the numbers that are going to be important for you. So let's go into the mortgage calculator, and I'm just pulling external resources. I make this available to you just so you see it, so you're able to replicate this no matter when you're watching this video, and to make it as most useful for you. So let's go to bankrate.com, go to the mortgage calculator, and make a lot of assumptions here. So let's just say we are going to buy this home for $400,000. All right, so that's the price that we're going to put on this home, or offer that we're going to make on this home. And then we're going to be asked by the lender, we're going to be asked by our bank, well, how much do you plan to put down? So when you're making this selection, there's several things to consider. Well, one, how much you have available, disposable to put down. Now, this down payment goes towards the equity of your home, meaning goes towards the ownership of your home. This is the money that you invest here is the money that you're going to essentially recuperate when you sell your home at the end of the day. So it's how much you actually own of the property. So here, let's just say we are going to put 20% down. Now, you don't have to put 20% down. The reason that a lot of folks think that you do need to put 20% down is because if you don't put up to 20% down, or I'm sorry, at least 20% down, you are paying what's called mortgage insurance. And mortgage insurance is essentially an insurance that the lender puts on you in the event that you default. So think of it at whatever interest rate you get, let's say 7% in interest rate, think of about 0.5% more just in mortgage insurance. So it is going to be a higher monthly cost. So in order to avoid that, you would need to put at least 20% down. Now, again, you don't have to. You can put 5% down. You can put 3% down on a conventional. You can put 3.5% down, which is the minimum for an FHA. You don't have to go all the way to, you don't have to put 20% down to make it work. But in this particular case, just for round numbers, we're going to go ahead and leave it at 20% down. We're going to put a 30-year loan on this. Again, we're trying to buy this house right now for $400,000, and I'm going to show you the math that you're going to need for Grand Prairie. This is why we're making a Grand Prairie specific video, because property taxes are a real thing that I'm going to show you are going to affect things. So depending on when you're watching this video, this interest rate is going to change. All you have to do is go to Google and type in Google mortgage interest rates today. And the bank rate's probably going to show up here. Here we go. Sorry, I was on another page here. So I just typed in mortgage interest rates today, and then Friday at the time of this recording, the 30-year, the average is about 6.85%. So that's assuming a lot of things. That's assuming a strong credit. That's assuming a strong down payment. So we're going to make that assumption as well. We're going to say that our interest rate is 6.85%. And we're going to start we're going to keep going. Now, credit score, we're going to leave it as is. We already gave ourselves a credit score, interest rate. Now, property taxes, this 263 is wildly wrong. This is highly inaccurate. Do not make any decisions based off of this number because it's not a real number. If you go to the property description in and of itself, you see what the current owner paid last year in property taxes. So if you do the math on that, just using that number alone, you're going to see that it's not the number that you're seeing on the screen. That you're seeing of whatever that was, 263. If you use even the present owners, what they paid in property taxes, that's 557. But even that's wrong. The reason that it's wrong is because that's what the current owner paid. Chances are the current owner has what's called a homestead exemption, which helps them reduce property taxes. Also, it helps them cap the amount of the assessed value that it can rise, so they're paying less in property taxes. But when you purchase a home, chances are you're not going to be as lucky. Chances are you're going to be paying more in property taxes. So what we're going to do is we're going to exaggerate a few things, and I'll share with you where those are. We're going to assume, again, we're going to buy this house for $400,000. Now, what's very important for us is to understand what the property tax rate is for Grand Prairie. So we're going to go to Grand Prairie right now. So all I did was Google Grand Prairie property tax, and this was the first page that showed up. So now we can scroll down and see what it looks like. Now, here's the thing. You see all of these numbers. Do not don't panic on me. This is normal. This is fine. Don't panic on me. So with the property tax rates, here's what we have. There's up to 5 numbers that you need to take into consideration. Number 1 is going to be the county that the city is in. So Grand Prairie happens to be in both Tarrant and Dallas County. So we have to factor that in, where the property happens to be. The second thing to consider with your property taxes is the city tax rate. Each city has a tax rate. Every single city has a tax rate. The third thing to consider is the ISD tax rate, so the school tax rate. This is going to be the highest tax rate of the potential five that you're going to see. So these 3 numbers that I just gave you, county, city, tax, county, city, ISD, these 3 numbers are going to be applied in every single city that you go to. So just be mindful of that. And then the other 2 that often come up is going to be the higher education tax and or hospital network tax. So we're going to see if that's the case here. So let's just say this home is in Dallas County, because it is. So we're going to go here and we're going to go down the Dallas side. So you're going to see the county rate that I mentioned. So that's that first number. The city rate that I mentioned, there's that second thing. And then the ISD tax rate. So if your kiddos go to Grand Prairie ISD or to Cedar ISD, that's a different tax rate. And then the higher education tax rate and also the hospital tax rate. Right? So you're going to add these up together. So let's just assume, with the exception of this, like it's either you go to this ISD or this ISD, or this ISD or this ISD. So Grand Prairie does give you a ton of options. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to add these together. So we're going to assume, actually we don't need to assume, we know exactly where. We're going to go here and find out the ISD, Grand Prairie ISD. So we know several things. We know it's Grand Prairie, and we know that it's Dallas County. So all we have to do is add this plus this plus this plus this plus this. And if you're thinking, wow, Jaime, that is a lot of property taxes, you're right, because property taxes in the state of Texas are insanely high. It's the 7th highest property tax state in the country. But also remember that this is a no state income tax state. So take that. So the property tax rate that we're talking about here is 2.25%. 2.25%. Now, here's what I mentioned to you, we're going to manipulate a few numbers here and there, and it has to do with this 400,000. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to multiply this percentage, 2.25% times the market value of the home. I'll say this again, market value of the home. This is what we're buying the property for. This number is a high conservative number. You will not pay this amount. I'll say this again, you will not pay the amount that we're about to calculate here. The reason being is because when you get taxed, you are not going to be paying the market value. You're going to be paying based off of the assessed value. So with the assessed value, after you apply the homestead exemption and just historically, the assessed value that the county appraisal district is going to charge you is less than this. So this $400,000 that we're going to multiply this 2.25% against is higher than what the assessed value is going to be. So the number that you're going to see in property taxes is going to be lower than what you're going to see on the screen today. So I'm going to multiply 0.0225, that's the percentage, times 400,000. Again, the market value, which is a high estimate, and that puts property taxes in 9,000 range. And we're going to divide that by 12, and that's 750. And you're thinking, daggum, that is a lot. And you're right. But had we taken that number of 263 at its core, we would have gotten it wrong. Now here again, the 750 is not a real number. It's actually going to be less than this. I would guess it's probably about 648, 645 or so. However, that is still higher than what you saw quoted there, and also higher than this. I almost guarantee you that this amount is going to be higher for you because you just bought it. Hopefully this makes sense. Let me know in the chat if this is making sense. If not, I can make more specific videos about property taxes. I have a few here on the channel, but this is something that I really want us to get right because it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. So what this means for us, let me go here and finish this up. Home insurance for a property of this value, let's just say $200 to be conservative. PMI, we don't pay that because we're putting 20% down. Let's pretend that we're not in an HOA, so we're going to update. And this means that we are paying about $3,000 per month for our mortgage. Now this will change if we do less. If we do less money down, so if we do 5% down as an example with down payment, this number is going to be probably around $3,400. Why? Well, because we're borrowing more, and also because then we will have PMI. We will have private mortgage insurance because the bank is going to require that. All right, so I know I went through a lot, but again, if you're buying in Grand Prairie, it is important that we understand these numbers. Buying in Grand Prairie does not need to be too different from Arlington, from Dallas, from Fort Worth, but in reality, it is simply because why? Well, property taxes. Simply because you saw here, this is a big difference with going to Grand Prairie ISD versus Cedar Hill. That's 0.07% difference. And that is every single year. There's a difference every single year. Like Grand Prairie versus a Mansfield ISD, right? So there are these differences. There are these nuances that you want to be mindful of. Living on one side of the street in Tarrant County versus Dallas County, that too has a price. Same thing with your county. Like you see the differences. The only thing that's not going to change is the city tax rate itself, which makes sense. But as you see, the city is scattered throughout 2 different counties and is scattered throughout 4 different ISDs. And that's going to affect your bottom line whenever you're paying property taxes. So that's why we have to be so specific when we're buying in Grand Prairie. And I want to show this down to the penny of what the differences will look like. All right, so that's a bit about the home search. We can go and talk about going under contract, and let's look at the contract for that particular purpose, because it is going to be important that we understand the contract. Now, this is not a contracts class, but I am going to share with you some things that are going to be that are going to come up. I don't know where to show. Let me move here myself. I'm going to show you just some major things that you're going to want to look for whenever you are purchasing a property. Now, if you're already represented, your real estate agent should be going over this contract with you. If you are not represented, our contact information is down below. We would love to assist you with this. And also go to DFWHomebuyerClass.com and get the full breakdown on what the contract actually is and what it is not. All right, so the parties, that's pretty self-explanatory. Who are the sellers? Who are the buyers? Now, since Texas is a communal state, you are going to, you are looking at, if you're married, you're going to be putting both of you on this contract. Property, you're legally putting what parcel, what property you're actually purchasing. Exclusions. So the exclusions, anything that is affixed to the property is going to stay unless it is listed here. So as an example, if there's a chandelier that you saw while you were looking at that property and it shows up here, hey, everything except the chandelier is sellable, then that's what's going to show up here. So just be mindful of that. Sales price. So the sales price right now is, so sales price is something that you're going to look, it's really one of the most important things whenever you're looking at the offer, obviously, and you're going to disclose to the seller how much of the sales price you're actually going to bring in cash and how much of the sales price you're actually going to borrow. This gives the seller an idea of the financial strength that you might have, may or may not have, right? So if we're putting the minimum down payment in cash, then if we're competing against an offer that is putting 20% down, 30% down, 50% down, then let's be real, our offers are not in equal footing, at least in the eyes of the seller. So this is on the sales price. This is where you're disclosing that. Now, if there are leases, most of the leases are not going to matter to you unless you are doing solar leases and or residential leases. So those are the two most common ones. So residential lease is what's most common that I see, at least here in the DFW Metroplex, especially here in Grand Prairie. Fixture fee leases, then you're looking at solar panels. Now, these leases will, in most cases, depending on how it's structured in the price of the home, most of the time the sellers will actually buy the solar panels outright in order for them to sell their home. Now, that's what actually, we listed a home in Grand Prairie, and that was one of the first things that we had to do in order to get that home sold. To the seller had to buy out the rest of the solar panels in order for the sale to actually go through. They had to pay that off. Earnest money and termination option. So basically, earnest money versus option fee. So let's talk about what earnest is and what option is. So let's talk about earnest for a quick second. Earnest, think of it like a deposit. So here in this contract, you are saying that I'm going to buy this house and I'm going to put some down, I can't say down payment because that's going to confuse us. I'm putting some earnest money down. I'm putting a deposit. I am very serious about buying this house. And to show you how serious I am, I'm going to put something down as a deposit. I keep saying down, as a deposit. I'm going to put some money in as a deposit. So what's common, it's not required, but what's common is 1% of the value of the home. So in this particular case, if I was advising our clients, we'd be putting around $4,000. Now, if we really wanted that house and we knew that there was quite a few people out there, but we knew we wanted that house and we were willing to pay for it, then we would probably go up a little bit higher in the earnest to show seriousness and show high motivation. So we would put 5, 6. In some cases, I've put up to 10% down for our clients because they absolutely wanted that house. I keep saying down, I'm sorry. I put 10% in earnest because they really wanted that house. So that's what happens here. And after we execute this contract, after we get this agreed to, we have 3 days. So this is important. We have 3 days to put this money into the title company's hands. I'll say it again. Once we get this contract executed, we have 3 days to put the earnest money into the title company's hands, or else we default. So the reason I bring this up is because we may be saying, okay, well, yeah, I can do $4,000, but I have to get it from my 401k. I have to get it from my wherever. Well, we're running into times, we're running into windows where that money can actually not get into our bank account fast enough in order for us to go and deposit it into the title company. So just be mindful of that. So that's why whenever we were talking about the financial assessment here, we're talking about the financial assessment, there are transaction costs that go into purchasing, and this is one of those that this earnest, once we put this into play, we are expected to pay within 3 business days. Now, here's the beauty of this. This is, as a deposit denotes, as the word earnest money, I guess as the deposit denotes, this is the deposit if you go through and purchase this property. Now, if you don't go through and actually purchase this property, then you either get it refunded back to you if you didn't break the contract. Now, if you broke this contract for whatever reason, that earnest money is gone. So this is what's at stake. So if you put $4,000 in earnest money and you break the contract because you just broke it or didn't know that you were breaking it, or your agent didn't advise you, hey, you're actually in breach of contract and you're going to lose your money if you do X, Y, and Z. If you don't have that counsel, you just lost $4,000. Right? So that's something to be very, very mindful. And that's actually in the best case. You could be sued for performance, meaning if you break this contract because you just decide, change your mind, had a cold feet, and just aren't going to follow through with it, well, you better hope that they just accept the earnest money and go on about their way. Or they could sue you for performance, meaning they could sue you and force you to buy that house legally. So just be mindful of that. Now, that's one thing. Now, termination, this is important to cover as well, is the option, what we call option money, option fee. This is where you pay a certain amount, typically about $100 to $200 for a certain amount of days for you to have the option to buy this home. And during that option period, this is where you will put an inspector in there. You'll go and generally get you'll hire a general inspector out there that will charge you about $400, $500 to go through the property and give you an assessment of the condition of that home. Now, that's at least one inspection that you must do. You absolutely want to use it. Even if you don't plan to negotiate anything after that, you absolutely want to do this in order for you to have that peace of mind of what you're buying, or have an idea of what you're buying. Now, if something comes up that's more technical, something more specific, let's just say the HVAC unit just never responded, never turned on, the inspector spends about 3 to 4 hours in that property, but they don't have time to troubleshoot that, then you would be going out and sending out an HVAC professional, and they go out based off of service fees. If the roof just looks a little bit suspect, then you would be looking at sending out a roofing company out there. So there's some additional inspections that you can go out and do, but at bare minimum, please get a general inspection out there done. And here again, you get a certain amount of days for that. Typically, what I see in most contracts and what we write in most contracts is about anywhere from $100 to $200, depending on the motivation, for about 7 days in option. So within those 7 days, we can get out of that contract for any and all reasons to get all our money back, except that option fee of that $100 to $200, or we can just stay in that contract and keep it moving, right? So within those 7 days, or whatever however many days you negotiate in option, you can get out of that contract for any and all reasons. You don't need really much explanation. You just say I exercise my right, my option to terminate contract. That's basically the amendment that gets sent out. All right, so title policy and survey. These are two important pieces of information that we need to cover. So when it comes to title policy, you're essentially needing an insurance that what you're buying is in fact going to be legally yours, and that's what the title policy does for you. Now, the title policy here again is something that is negotiable. Everything on here is negotiable. Nothing has to be set in stone. So when it comes to the seller, when it comes to the title policy, you do want the title company involved. You do want them to review the title of this property that you're buying to make sure that when you are buying this property, it actually is fully yours when it is the sale is final. Now, depending on the type of market that we're in, whether it's a buyer's market or seller's market, that's going to determine who's generally going to pay for the title policy. But in normal markets, in normal circumstances, it's the seller that ends up paying the title policy in normal circumstances. And that is typically going to be, for a property of this size, it's going to be probably about $3,000, give or take. And then the survey is basically a piece of paper that lets you know what your price, like the not like you are, it's a piece of paper that lets you know what you're buying. It has a drawing, a rendering of the all the boundary lines, or it lets you know where the property is, where the property sits. It lets you know if there's easement. So this easement is most common type of easement that you're going to see here in Grand Prairie is a utility easement, where if your house backs up to the alley, there's probably going to be an easement down there where the utility company can go and build something underneath or build something on top of it, and you really can't stop them. So as an example, one of the reasons that I bring this up whenever you're looking at a survey and there's an easement back there, a lot of us like our sheds. I have a shed back there. Well, I'm not going to build a shed on an easement, risking that fact that somebody's going to come through, a utility company is going to come through later trying to lay fiber, as an example, because they could absolutely destroy my shed and have no responsibility or no liability to build it back. So just be mindful of that. But that's why a survey is very important. So it's something that you will be requested to have, whether one exists or doesn't exist. You will be requested to have. So a surveyor is going to go out there and get that in the event that it doesn't exist, and depends on who pays for it, the seller or the buyer. But you're looking at about $600. Then you can also be looking at, if it's in the property is in HOA, you're going to be putting that down. Seller's disclosure, this is something that you want to be mindful of whenever you're buying a property. The homeowner legally has to send you a seller's disclosure. It needs to provide to you a disclosure from them, and based off it's a legal requirement from the Texas Property Code. So the seller needs to disclose to you what they believe the condition of the home to be. So what they believe the home actually has or doesn't have. So does it have foundation issues? Does it have a certain type of, does it have alarms? Does it have smoke detectors? Does it have A, B, and C? Like, the seller's disclosure, depending on which version you get, but seller's disclosure is typically about a 4-page document that has so many different things that the homeowner can fill out to give you a snapshot of what the condition of the home is, and they legally are required to send that to you. Even if they leave it blank, they're legally required to send that to you. All right, so then you select on when you're closing. On average, you're going to be closing within about 25 days on average. That gives your lender plenty of time to do what they need to do and get you approved. That gives you plenty of time to provide everything that you need to provide to a lender, so you're going to be in a good spot. All right, cool. Let's get into week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. So I break our weeks down. So once we get under contract, once we know what we're doing, I break it down into 4 main weeks for our agent, for our clients, to make it easy. Week 1 is just the week of inspections. So oftentimes it's going to be the general inspector that goes out there. We get the full report. If there's some questions about the HVAC, about the roof, about the plumbing, about the electrical, then we might get some additional, more specialized professionals out to the property to inspect that home, just to make sure that everything is in order. During that first week, oftentimes we'll either ask for the homeowner to repair some of the things that we didn't know were wrong with the property, and or we ask the homeowner to give us a credit so we can do it. So as an example, in one of our most recent transactions, in the inspection, there was some inspection as active termites. So with that particular situation, we're getting it handled, right? So that's what happens in the inspections. Week 1 is typically, it's going to be 5 to 7 days of option in most cases. So you're going to take that first week to really get through those hurdles to make sure that this is ultimately the home that you want to buy. If you don't want to buy it after you see that inspection and the seller maybe isn't willing to work with you, then you have the option to get out of that contract and then keep it moving. Week 2, I call it approval week. So approval week is really where you are working as hard as possible to get as many documents over to your lender and some to the title company, but not as much. The title company operates pretty independently, but the lender does not. They need as much information from you as possible. That's where you provide W-2s. That's where you provide verification of employment. That's when you provide tax returns. You provide as much as you possibly can. And that's what happens in that second week, that you're going to be sending so much information. You're going to send bank statements. You're going to send profit and loss statements. If you are self-employed, you're going to provide a ton of information during that second week, or you should. I wouldn't recommend that you delay that at all, because in some cases you're going to be not at the mercy of your own pace, but you're going to be at the mercy of another entity and how quickly they can turn around things on your behalf. So during week 2, that's when the lender will generally order what's called an appraisal. And the appraisal is essentially a third-party individual that will go out to the property and give the opinion of value. So essentially they're going to appraise a property and give that to the lender to let them know what the value of the asset that they are going to be buying alongside with you actually has. So in this example, let's just say we buy this home for $400,000, and we're trying to buy this home for $400,000, but the appraiser goes out there and says, hey, this property is actually worth $320,000. And then that's going to be an issue because if this appraiser is telling you that this home is worth $320,000 and you have it under contract for $400,000, then what's going to happen between that? What's going to happen of that delta? What's going to happen of that $80,000? So again, you're under contract for $400,000, and the appraiser is telling the lender this home is valued at $320,000. Well, one of three things is going to happen: either the seller agrees to go down to that $320,000 so you are able to buy it, or you have to come up with the difference in cash. So you have to go. You're going to get $320,000 from the lender, but you have to come up with $80,000 additional to get up there to that $400,000 that you're under contract for, or you're going to meet somewhere towards the middle. It's not going to be exactly at the middle. It just depends on who has the strongest leverage. But at the end of the day, it's going to be somewhere in between to make that deal happen. So one of those three things is going to happen if the transaction continues moving forward. And the fourth option is it just doesn't move forward. So that's three things can move it forward. One can absolutely just derail it. And in that particular case, there are protections that you can have in your transaction so you can get out of that contract here still unscathed with but it does require you working with a real estate professional that knows how to do this, so you don't have to lose your earnest money. That's what's at stake here. And then week 3. Week 3 is your conditions week. So I call it the conditions week because that's when lenders will typically send out more. They'll qualify you upon the condition of X, or they'll give you, or they'll ask for more specific items that are more specific to your situation. So as an example, they may be asking, hey, here you put that you own some additional real estate, and you're saying that there's no HOA to speak of. I need you to send me a letter attesting that fact, right? So they're providing a conditions, like this loan is approved upon the condition that you do A or B or C. So that's what you start seeing around week 3 from the lender. And around week 4, you are looking at moving in. So around week 4, that's when you start looking at the, you should be finalizing your moving plans. You should be finalizing at what time and date you're going to be what time you're going to be closing. You already know the date. And you're going to be looking at finalizing the utilities and when they're going to be turned on. So when you get that home, you are not left without water. That's what's happening in week 4. And then week 5, upon closing, that's when we talk about the once you close, this is what we send out to our clients right before they're closing, right after they close, a week after they close, a month after they close, and we continue to remind them of things that they should be working on so they can have the most favorable experience. So this is, again, something that we send out immediately after they close, so then they get the first week what they need to be doing. Then after 30 days, or within the first 30 days, they should be doing this. Within the year, they should be doing this, and then some pro tips along the way. If you're thinking about buying in Grand Prairie and need some assistance, our contact information is down below. Now, if you want the entire breakdown from beginning to absolute end, check out our DFWHomebuyerClass.com, DFWHomebuyerClass.com. That's where you can see this and then some, all of our resources, all of our calculators, and everything in between. But until then, see you on the next one. Thanks so much.